everyone, my name is Danielle and welcome to another episode of Board Game Bakes. This week we're going to focus on Panorama, which is a new game by Sparkworks. In the game you have one card that you draft each turn, and you have to decide whether you want to put on the panorama on your left or the panorama on your right. So unlike games with a similar concept, you only have one card. You have to be very wise in your decision on where it could go and have to make sure that the hills line up and everything. So there's a lot of thought that goes into what you're going to do with that one card. So naturally we're going to be recreating the cards as cookies. So when I think about going on the trails, which is what this is supposed to be, it's supposed to be that you're taking pictures at dusk and at dawn, I think of trail mix. So we're quite literally going to take your favorite trail mix and put it inside a sugar cookie, and it's pretty delicious. So let's see how you do it. Time to dive back into cookie world. This is my favorite sugar cookie with a little hiking twist. You take your favorite trail mix and put it in the food processor. I seem to like putting ingredients in my food processor recently. Pulse until the pieces are not larger than an M&M, so this way you don't have trouble rolling the dough out. To make your dough, cream 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1 cup or 2 sticks of softened unsalted butter until it's a pale yellow color. Meanwhile, add 3/4 teaspoon baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon salt to 3 cups of flour and mix it to distribute the additives. Next, add 1 tablespoon of milk, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, and 1 egg to the butter mixture. Once it's uniform, slowly add your flour mixture. Before you add the last of your flour though, add your trail mix. I find this makes mixing a little easier. Finish adding your flour. Once it's mixed together, pour it out onto the counter, and you can knead in any of those last crumb bits to make it nice and smooth but chunky dough. Divide the dough in 2 and form into flat discs. Wrap them in plastic wrap and put them in the fridge for 2 hours or overnight. Once your dough is chilled, roll it out to 1/4 of an inch thickness. And I didn't have an exact size rectangle that I needed, so I used a larger rectangle and then measured out the width and cut it. So this way I kind of improvised, or you could also just make a stencil for what you want and do that as well. But I find that whenever you can use a cookie cutter, that makes life easier. Arrange them on a baking sheet and bake at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 7 to 9 minutes. Let's get decorating. We're starting as basic as you get for royal icing decorated cookies. Outline each rectangle with a thick white royal icing. Fill in the rectangle with a thin white royal icing. I made this at Cookies during a great cookie sprint. I was doing 3 different cookies at once, which wasn't really the best idea. But having these just be the plain white royal icing made it a lot easier to add to my mix of other cookies I was doing. Time to whip out the airbrush. I chose to use the airbrush for most of these details instead of colored royal icing because the art on the cards kind of reminds me of the effect of an airbrush. Let's start with dusk. Use a dark forest green to airbrush the grass. Use a ruler across your panorama so that they line up later. I decided it was easiest to divide the cookies into groups of 4 and then make small panorama scenes. In the game you have long stretches of cards, but it's kind of hard to keep track of all the cookies and cards and how they correlate. Next, move on to the skies. Use a dark blue with a little black for the dusk cards. If possible, create stencils of your skylines. This makes using the airbrush a lot easier and creates more crisp lines. However, it takes more precision since the one I made didn't fully match up. Spray black for the hills and mountains. You can also create tree and hill stencils of different sizes, so this way they look uniform across your cookies. Use dark green to spray the hills. Once that layer of airbrush paint has had time to dry, you can add the moon and some more trees. Unfortunately, the lighter colors didn't seem to come through over the dark sky as much as I wanted them to, so we're going to switch back to royal icing for details. All the details are added using white royal icing, and the colors are added later using edible markers once it dries. Outline your hills and use your finger to blur the edges and add a kind of moon reflection. Or maybe you're just adding some definition as well. You never know. Use your finger to make smudge spots for the aurora borealis and the haze along the horizon. Time for my favorite part. Use your royal icing to add the stars in the night sky. You also use the royal icing to draw any animals that are neat on the cards, and you don't want to forget the rectangles on the bottom, which is how you get the points. The highest scoring cards for me during the dust phase was the aurora borealis cards, or at least they helped me score a lot of points. Once your royal icing is dried, it's time to add your details. The brightest accents you have are for the aurora borealis or northern lights. Have fun adding bright colors to match the cards. You get to color in your fox, moose, and bear shapes, or at least as best as you can because they're pretty small. I also like the fire card. It rewards you for having animals next to it. Okay, now the sun has officially set, so you'll have to wait until dawn to take more pictures. A similar process is repeated for the dawn cookies. The grass color for dawn is a more yellow-green than the dusk one, unsurprisingly. The dawn sky has a lot more colors, so I found it was easier to line them all up instead of doing each panorama individually. Then you don't have to switch colors in your airbrush as much. Start with purple, move to pink, and finally a golden yellow. To create the mountains at dawn, use a dark purplish gray. First outline them and then fill them in accordingly with the cards. I'll say that doing all these nature panoramas really makes me want to go for a hike and go camping, preferably not by the bears. Too bad we're still in the middle of winter. Use a lighter green and the hill stencil to add hills to the cookies. Switch to yellow and spray your sun and some yellow along the horizon. Unfortunately, the white airbrush color didn't really stand out against the other colors, so we're going to switch back to our royal icing, just like we did for dusk. Use it to outline the mountains and add peaks. You can use your finger to smear it, and this has a lighter, more reflective edge instead of just a straight line. Use white royal icing to add highlights to the peaks, as well as to draw on the animals for these ones too. Once your royal icing has dried, it's once again time to add the finishing touches. It's much easier to switch between different colors of edible marker than between icing bags, which is why I like this approach a little better. Add some yellow highlights to your sky, river details, and pull out your reference cards to figure out which colors to color your scoring rectangles. There's a lot of fun cards in Dawn, like the sun, which gives you points based on the number of cards to the left, or the ranger station that wants flipped over cards next to it. Use orange edible marker to color your fox. The fox cards are interesting because they don't give you any points, but a lot of the overarching point markers are based on the number of foxes in the panorama. The game I played wanted the least amount of foxes. Now the cookies are done, and now you can just focus on eating them or taking them on your next nature photo shoot. Good luck! Thanks for watching another episode of Board Game Bakes. I hope you enjoyed seeing the panoramas come together and that you give the game a try. It was a lot of fun. When you play the actual game, your panoramas are much longer, and then sometimes you'll have a really short one because depending on what rewards you have out determines how you want to build your panoramas. What's your favorite game with this type of mechanic where you have cards that you decide whether to put on your left or your right? I know there's Between Two Cities, things like that. Are there any other games I haven't heard of? Let me know in the comments below. While you're down there, hit subscribe for new videos every Tuesday at 12 p.m. EST. Keep playing games and keep them sweet. Bye!